T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have...
From its first flight in 1981 till its final landing in 2011, the Space Shuttle was the backbone of the American space program. Built upon the experience gained from Apollo, and with the goal of making a reusable spacecraft, NASA accomplished a feat that most thought was impossible. 5 complete shuttle systems were built and completed 135 missions to low Earth orbit. They conducted science experiments, deployed and fixed the Hubble Space Telescope, and helped to build the International Space Station, which is in healthy operation still. Using Kerbal Space Program, we'll take a deep dive into each mission, looking at the crew, payload, and mission objectives. Join us on this walk through history. And hey, you just might learn something. I'm Sears JT, and this is Project STS. Starting the night off, STS-5. It's the only mission of Columbia we're going to see tonight, because a new challenger enters the fray after this mission. Just a couple opening remarks about STS-5, launched on November 10th, 1982. 4.5 months after STS-4, which is so far, I think, a record for shuttle turnaround time, but we'll talk about that actually in a later mission. That record actually gets shattered with another mission. The crew for this mission, clear out these, is the first crew of 4, I think. Is the commander Vance D. Brand, pilot Robert Overmeyer, and 2 mission specialists, Joseph P. Allen, he's in here somewhere, and William B. Lenoir. Seems French. Like I said, launched November 10th, 1982 at noon UTC, 7 a.m. Eastern. There was actually no delays for this launch. I think it was the first one that actually left on time when they said it was supposed to. So we'll go ahead and close this up. I'll talk about the payload once we start getting up to orbit. And I'll talk about the crew as well once we're off the ground. Other than that, I think we're ready to go. Other than it left on time. It was pretty straightforward mission for Columbia until it got a little bit of a break. So let's go ahead and put her up in the air. STS on. Staging should be good. Not gonna lie, I don't think I've tested ascent with these satellite carriers, so if things go wrong, we might have to revert, but we'll see. Alright, launching in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of STS-5 Space Shuttle Columbia. Actually, I take that back. I did test this. Go for roll. I remember saying it felt very, very heavy on liftoff, and it already 100% feels a little bit heavier. Also, my goal for tonight is to land more than 1 shuttle on a runway. Come on, snackless with snacks. No, get those snacks out of here, Optimal. Okay, so while we're going up, I will talk about our crew. The commander being Vance D. Brand. He would go on to be the commander for 3 more, or actually 3 total STS missions, this being his first. He was a fighter pilot in the Air Force, which most of these astronauts were, before becoming a test pilot for Lockheed Martin. And he logged tons of time in test aircraft, and with his time with the Air Force. He was selected as part of astronaut class 5, which we've talked about class 5 in the past. Because class 5 included Swigert from Apollo 13, Hayes, Engel, who was the STS-2 commander, Evans Jr., who was the CM pilot for Apollo 17, Irwin on 15, Lausma, STS-3 commander. So like, there's a lot of names. Or Mattingly, STS-4 pilot. So there's a lot of names we've already discussed in that class. So he comes from a good pedigree. This is actually his second space flight. He was I think he was a pilot. I didn't write it down what he was, but I think he was a pilot on the Apollo-Soyuz test mission, which also has come up quite a bit. Going up an SRB sub. SRB sub. Confirmed. Okay, so we'll move on to Robert Overmyer, who is a name that will come up again later. This is his first shuttle mission. He would later fly an STS-51B. Before the program was canceled, he was selected as an astronaut for the Manned Orbital Laboratory, which was the extension of the Gemini program, where they would like remake the Gemini capsule into a space station, more or less. But since that was canceled, he had to kind of find some new work. He was Capcom for Apollo 17 and a T-38 chase pilot for the ALTs 1 and 3. So he's got some experience with the shuttle already, and being a Capcom for Apollo 17, he's got also an experienced guy. So Sojourner has 2 wings and the rest is body lift. Gotcha. I'm pitching over a little too far. Let it go. Okay, we'll move on to the mission specialists. One with Joseph P. Allen. He was part of astronaut group 6, who were all science astronauts. So they were selected just to be mission specialists for based on the mission that the space shuttle was flying. Or not the space shuttle, but like they were also Apollo science astronauts as well. There's a lot of members of Group 6 that we'll see also later on. He served as the astronaut support crew on Apollo 15 and the support crew for STS-1. So he'll come up again later, as well as a lot of his classmates. But he's a greenhorn on this mission. Like that, okay. And then the other mission specialist, William B. Lenore. He's also a pretty greenhorn astronaut, but he was a backup science pilot for Skylab 3 and 4, and he was part of the NASA satellite power team, which sounds exactly how it, as it's called. They were in charge of, or researching various ways of powering satellites, which on this mission, since we're launching 2 communication satellites, that comes in handy. Once we talk about mission specialists and their backgrounds, it'll make total sense why they're on the mission they are, based on what's in the payload bay of the shuttle. It's something I noticed also. Oop, I'm pitching over too far. Let me make sure that this is a stable ascent, which it looks like it is. Okay. Yeah, so that's the 4 crew members. Brand, Overmyer, Allen, and Lenore. The support crew, again, names. I've mentioned these in the previous episodes, but names that will come up later because a lot of the names on flying on this mission were support crew for other past missions. Enter Capcom being Roy D. Bridges, backed up by Michael Coates, Richard Comby, Brian O'Connor, John McBride, with Robert Stewart being the Ascent Capcom. I guess there's really no third Capcom, but... And then we'll talk about mission and payload once we get in orbit. Oh, I forgot to mention, all those support crew members that I just listed off, they will fly on future space shuttle missions. Some of them, a lot of space shuttle missions. So, well, actually, it's not that exciting, but it flew to a perigee of 183 miles with an apogee of 197, which is about in line with the past 4 missions. It's kind of about the same. And, you know that whole I'm pitching over too far thing? Yeah, it was... That was a lie. Okay, we're getting too high. I'm gonna have to bring that orbit down. Okay. 2. music fits perfectly. Sorry, I'm turning on RCS just to get turned over quicker. Okay, we are go for ETSEP. Roger. All mess. Okay, we have confirmed. ETSEP. Pulling away from external tank now. The external tank will burn up in the atmosphere. Once we get fully in orbit, I'll talk about the satellites it's carrying. Although they are quite pretty straightforward. Alright, go for circularization. Part. So while we're finishing this up, I can say that this was the first shuttle flight where the crew were not required to wear pressure suits during ascent, re-entry, and landing. Since it was quote-unquote considered an operational vehicle, they were not required to wear pressure suits. Which is interesting because, I mean, I guess I can just talk about this now. Due to the first disaster, I guess, was the Challenger one. How I say, like, the first 4 flights were test flights. This one is the first operational, quote-unquote, flight of the shuttle. But after that disaster, the NTSB, I believe, said that no, this craft is not certified. It is not an operational craft because if we certify actual jets and stuff, they fly for hundreds, maybe even thousands of not thousands, but hundreds of flights before they're considered operational, which the shuttle flew 4 times. You cannot consider a craft operational after 4 flights. So for the rest of the program after this mission, the shuttle was considered an experimental craft, according to the safety board. Which is kind of interesting. Because I don't think you can... It's kind of an apples to oranges comparison. Circularization complete. We have reached a stable orbit. Roger. So yeah, when I read about that, I was like, I didn't know that they had reverted the label they had given the shuttle. Which by the time the disaster happened, I don't remember how many... I didn't look at how many missions happened between STS-4 and STS-51L. It wasn't that many. But you feel like it was enough to maybe say, okay, we had this many flights, mostly accident-free. We'll get into that with 7. But this thing went to space like tens of times before something happened and came back. So, but even so, that's an unfair comparison because it's terrible that it happened, but 51L happened on liftoff. It didn't happen. It wasn't the shuttle's fault. It was the stack's fault, more or less. Which I think gets into a weird gray area with how do you certify craft. I guess you can't include the stack as part of the craft because it needs it to get to orbit to do its mission, but I don't know. It was interesting reading about that. I'll just say that. All right. So, payload bay doors are open. So you see the 2 comsats. I believe they ascended with these open because these canisters were meant as sunshades. So once they open the payload bay doors, they're like, okay, we need to protect the satellites until deployment. So then they closed them. I will go ahead and... Oops. I always do that. That's the wrong... Okay. Alright, so now that we're in orbit, the satellites are protected using the sunshades, I can talk about these 2 satellites. The one The bow satellite, more towards the bow of shuttle, is SBS-3. Actually, it's SBS-3, and then the aft one is it's Telesat 3. Or Anik C3. I've seen both names for the aft one. They're Hughes built HS-376 satellites, which we're going to see a lot of these as well. I think they were popular because they fit in these canisters and they could be deployed pretty easily from the space shuttle. But they were the first satellites to be deployed to start an all-digital domestic communication network in space. They were operating on a new gigahertz band. I guess my notes are really badly written here, but there was a new band of frequency that these digital satellites could operate on. So it was a first start in kind of digitizing things. SBS-3 is obviously owned by Satellite Business Systems. SBS makes sense, and the Telesat, or the Anik C3, is owned by Telesat Canada. They're using the PAM-D McDonnell Douglas kick motors. Again, we're going to see a lot of those kick motors. So they go from LEO, and the kick motors take them to geosynchronous orbits. So they're not along the equator. I didn't get the inclinations they go to, but they're geosynchronous orbits. These have deployed weird sometimes. The torque from the spin motors causes it to freak out. Actually, I need to be... Ooh. Hang on. Before I deploy these, I need to make sure I'm in the right orientation. Because how they did it... So, the satellites deploy, the skirt opens, right? It starts to spin. The spin stabilizes the satellite because it doesn't have gimbal control. And then it spins while it's doing its thing. Obviously, Kerbal can't keep stuff spinning like that. I'll just kind of fake it. And what they did, so I need to deploy this one sat here. So they deployed it so 45 minutes later, or half an orbit later on the other side of Earth, it could fire it at prograde to raise its orbit to geosynchronous. So when I get to perigee here, I need to make sure I'm facing retrograde, to be this direction, or this direction here. And then once we get around the other side, I fire the PAM-D motor on the satellite, and it raises the orbit to geosynchronous level, which on Kerbin, it's 1.5-ish 1,000 kilometers, I believe. That was actually totally out of my butt. I don't know if that's correct. On Kerbin, a synchronous orbit is 1.5 million kilometers. We'll see. I don't know if I do. So that means getting to here, I need to be facing... My nose needs to be facing either radial in or radial out. It doesn't really matter. Okay. As long as the payload bay is facing retrograde. And then once we get these satellites deployed, we'll do the first one, go to the other side, burn its motor, come back to perigee, deploy the other one, go back to apogee, burn its motor. So... get orientated radial. I'll just do a radial out. Okay. Yep. And the satellite's facing retrograde, which is perfect because it'll be facing that direction once we get the other side. Okay. We are locked. Radial out. So let's go deploy the first one. Wait a little bit till we get closer to perigee. Isn't T-minus a minute and a half? Okay. Speed this up a little bit. Did it have it on this one? Time to periapsis. It does. Fantastic. Alright. Reorientating back. Radial out. Better. This looks like some of the videos I was watching, man. It's cool. Alright, T-minus 20 seconds till deployment. Doesn't want to stay over here. 17 seconds. 10, we'll start deployment process, rudder. And mark. SPS-3 has started its deployment process. RCS firing to counteract. And deployment of SPS-3. There's my representation of the PAMD kick motor. The spin plate creates a little bit of torque, so it doesn't quite separate cleanly, unfortunately. So yeah, Kerbal's not going to let this spin happen, unfortunately. So these satellites were folded in. They were kind of compacted to fit inside the shuttle bay. So I have a cal controller here that, whoops, let's click. I believe it's tied to an action group, and I'll just play it from here. That will, I guess, evolve the satellite into its final form. Let's go ahead and do that. So this is the antenna, or not the antenna, but the dish on the top. And then there's like an inner part that folds out to extend. Make the satellite a little bit bigger. Gonna make sure it locks there. When I built this thing, it doesn't have enough SAS to control it that well, which is actually in line with the actual satellites. So we'll go ahead and activate this engine. Okay, so we're going to deploy at apogee again. So we're going to be radial out, and then we just got to make sure I'm facing the right direction. So let's orientate for Annex C3 deployment. And then once we deploy this, they did do a couple more things after that, which I will discuss once we get this satellite out of the payload bay. It's nothing too exciting. A lot of it were science experiments, but they did do an EVA for the first time on a shuttle flight, so there's some details about that I'll talk about to get this satellite deployed. Oh, I forgot to mention that well, I talked about it before we started it, but the STS-5 did fly with the DFI, which is the second to last mission to fly with it. They actually packed it back here behind the satellite carriers. And it's just sensors to measure stresses on the orbiter. Nothing too exciting. Retrograde is that way, towards 270. Okay. Your go for Annex C3 deployment, time to periapsis is 55 seconds. Okay, reoriented, deploying Annex C3. Sunscreen opening confirm. Satellite is spinning up. Just realized these solar panels are, it totally busted those solar panels. That's alright. Ignore the totally awesome solar panel configuration on this thing. It actually deployed a lot nicer than the other one. Annex C3 deployed. Okay. Well, this mission wasn't going to be without its problems, especially when I'm doing it, so hopefully that's my one mistake for the night, and we'll call it good. So, the satellites were deployed over the course of 2 days, and then they used their motors that I showed you guys, right? Yeah, we totally used the motors to bring them up to geosynchronous. Other than that, they carried some getaway special payloads, which I've talked about before, but the getaway specials were little canisters that outside organizations could send up science experiments with the shuttle. I didn't find who actually sent up experiments in those canisters, but one of them was a West German microgravity experiment. So I did find that, but I didn't find what the other canisters were. In the mid-deck, they did do 3 student design experiments. Some of them included growing latex, checking animal and insect, not animal, but insect behavior while in microgravity. So then that brings us to the EVA, the first EVA that happened during a shuttle mission in orbit. This was performed by Lenore and Allen. And they were meant to test the new suits. They were supposed to be cheaper, less complicated, and lighter than the Apollo EVA suits, which they found out isn't necessarily the case, but I'll kind of get into that. So back to the EVAs. They had to delay the EVAs a day because Lenore got motion sickness, which is kind of funny. But that will come up later as well, because it seems like a lot of people get sickness while in microgravity, especially if that's their first space flight. So Lenore and Allen were the mission specialists, so they were brought up on purpose because they actually helped design and develop these new suits. But they had to eventually cancel that EVA because there was a faulty oxygen regulator in one suit and a broken recirculation fan in the other. So they're like, nope, we're gonna scrub it and we'll do it later. It was the first time ever since spaceflight started in the US they had to cancel an EVA due to suit issues. So yeah, like other than these 2 satellites, they were meant to do an EVA. They canceled the EVA. So the mission just came down to we deployed 2 satellites and that was it. So like I said, this one's pretty straightforward and simple. We can go ahead and bring these guys home. Got lots of fuel left, so I'm gonna have to fuel dump. So let me check my notes while we're doing this to see if there's any other little tidbits I got before we do this. I don't think there is. We talked about the EVA cancellation, the satellite deployment, getaway specials, science experiments they did on the mid-deck, included a DFI, we talked about all the crew. Alrighty. Let's do it to it. Space Shuttle Columbia, for your final mission tonight, you go for re-entry. Do this thing. 29 kilometers. I'm going to pitch up 5 degrees. I'm going to bleed off a little bit more. The island runway is still in play. Island runway is still in play. I need to get the speed down. Yaw, pitch, roll, pitch. Okay. I'm not quite there yet, but we're about to hit the blue, so okay, off. We're in control. Main of control. Not looking too good. The island runway is completely in play right now. 100%. I can get to the island runway. Easy. Okay, let's turn that off. Get rid of this. Let's try, yeah. The island runway is 100% attainable here. Space Shuttle Columbia, you have clearance to land on Island Runway 1 due to your overshoot. I'm not quite lined up enough, but Although this one's not as nice as Kerbin's for sure. Oh, a little bit of hard landing. Full stop. Shuttle dance. Whew. Wait, well, time warp doesn't fix that? Anyways. I don't know why it bounces like that, but that's STS-5. Like I said, pretty straightforward mission. Kind of unexciting. Not much going on.